While my mother-in-law was happily shopping with my husband's mistress, I was canceling all her cards. My mother-in-law doesn't know a thing yet, that this Park Avenue penthouse she lives in is my property. My revenge has only just begun. The clinking of a silver spoon against a porcelain plate was the only music that filled the grand dining room. A massive crystal chandelier above the table reflected its golden light on the cold, brilliant surface of Italian marble. This was the stage where the drama of their family was performed every night. Catherine Pierce, the unrecognized director and lead actress, listlessly stirred her cream of asparagus soup. That night, she had prepared her husband Michael Thompson's favorite dish, osso buco, a process that took over 5 hours. But Catherine did it gladly, hoping to see a smile of satisfaction on his face. However, Michael ate in silence, his eyes more often on his phone screen than on his wife sitting across from him. "This stew is quite good, Catherine." Gloria's voice broke the silence. Her tone was dry but full of invisible barbs. "It reminds me of the chili from some greasy spoon diner near our old house. For someone like you to make it, it tastes quite authentic." A compliment wrapped in an insult. Catherine was used to it. She simply managed a slight curve of her lips, a pale smile she had practiced for years. "I'm glad you like it, Mom." "Of course, Mom likes it. Mom appreciates anything her daughter-in-law does," Michael said, finally looking up from his phone. He winked at Catherine, as if they were a conspiratorial team, but Catherine knew this defense was hollow. It was simply Michael's way of ending potentially uncomfortable conversations, not of protecting her pride. "But next time, try a recipe from the French cookbook I bought you. Our family needs to get used to classier dishes, not this common street food," Gloria continued, deliberately setting down her spoon with an elegant gesture. Catherine didn't respond. She just looked at her husband, searching for a shred of support in his eyes, but all she found was his evasive gaze as he busily poured water into his glass. In that very instant, Catherine felt like the loneliest person in the palace she herself had built. This home, filled with high ceilings and imported furniture, felt colder and emptier than the modest rental apartment she had grown up in. After dinner, as always, it was Catherine's job to clean everything up. The housekeepers were only allowed to work until the afternoon, a rule Gloria made, supposedly to protect the family's privacy at night. In reality, it was another way to underline Catherine's position as the personal servant of the house. As she scrubbed the expensive dishes she would have never dared to use in her own upbringing, Catherine saw her reflection in the dark kitchen window. It was the tired face of a woman who had everything but owned nothing. In the outside world, unknown to her husband and mother-in-law, she was a queen. Catherine was the founder and CEO of Apex Dynamics, a tech startup currently valued in the billions of dollars. She built the company from the ground up with her own sweat and tears, but in this house, she deliberately hid her brilliance. She let Michael appear as the successful head of the family, living off investments from his father's inheritance, a lie they had created together so as not to hurt Michael's ego. All this opulence, the penthouse, the cars, the vacations, even Gloria's limitless credit card came from Catherine's account. They lived comfortably off her hard work while constantly trampling on her pride. That night, as she rinsed the foam from her hands, Catherine wondered for the first time, how long must I continue this charade? Catherine's doubt didn't arrive like a storm. It was like a slow drizzle that soaked her clothes and chilled her bones. It all began with a routine check in her home office, a minimalist space equipped with cutting-edge technology that contrasted with the rest of the house, considered by Michael and Gloria as Catherine's quirky little hobby corner. There, behind the thick, solid wood door, Catherine shed her role as a submissive wife. She was K.P., a respected initial in the business world. In front of monitors displaying complex data and charts, she simultaneously monitored the pulse of her company and her personal finances. It was then that she noticed an anomaly. The credit card she had given Gloria, normally used only for monthly shopping at high-end grocery stores or occasional meetings at a hotel coffee shop, showed a strange spending pattern. There was a bill from the luxury boutique Serafina's for a sum equivalent to the price of a car. There were also multiple transactions at the Serafina Wellness Institute, an elite beauty salon where one treatment cost a manager's salary. And what appeared most frequently were dinner bills from the Celestial View, a fine dining restaurant atop a skyscraper that Catherine herself had never visited. At first, Catherine ignored it. She thought maybe Gloria wanted to treat herself, but the transactions were repeated almost weekly, and always on the same days that Michael claimed to have to work late on a new project or meet an important client from out of town. The suspicion grew thicker. Michael became more distant. His phone was always on silent, and he never parted with it. He often walked away to take calls in a low voice. Sometimes, when he came home late at night, Catherine would catch the scent of an unfamiliar woman's perfume on his shirt. It wasn't her mother-in-law's strong, classic fragrance, but a sweet, modern scent. When Catherine tried to ask, Michael always had a slick answer. "Oh, that must be a client's perfume, honey." The meeting room was tiny. Or, "Oh, I don't like talking about work at home. It gives me a headache." The breaking point came with a call from Chloe, her best friend from college. Chloe's voice was hesitant on the other end of the line. "Catherine, are you okay?" "Of course I am, Chloe. Why do you ask?" Catherine replied, forcing a cheerful tone. There was a pause. Catherine could hear Chloe take a deep breath. "I don't want to meddle, but I happened to see Michael at the department store a few days ago. He wasn't alone." Catherine's heart beat a little faster. "He must have been with a client," she said, more to convince herself. "It didn't look like a client, Catherine. And I think I also saw Gloria at the same restaurant, at the same table, laughing with them. But I was far away. I'm not sure." The call ended in an awkward atmosphere. Catherine said, "Thank you," but her mind was a whirlwind. Gloria, laughing with Michael and an unknown woman. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, forming a terrible picture she didn't even dare to imagine. The drizzle of doubt now felt like a heavy thundercloud over her head, ready to unleash a storm at any moment. 2 days later, the storm arrived via a short message on her phone. That afternoon, Catherine was in a video conference with her Singapore team. She was discussing the expansion strategy into the Southeast Asian market with eloquence and confidence. On the screen, she was a brilliant CEO, but when the call ended and silence once again filled her office, she returned to being the restless Catherine. Her phone vibrated on the desk, showing a notification from Chloe. Her heart skipped a beat. With slightly trembling hands, she opened the message. It was a short sentence. "I'm sorry, Catherine. I think you need to see this." Below the sentence was a photo. Catherine's world seemed to stop. The breath caught in her throat. The photo, apparently taken secretly from a nearby table, showed a scene in a cafe at a luxury boutique. There, sitting very intimately, were 3 people she knew. Her husband, Michael, was looking adoringly at a young woman beside him. She was, without a doubt, the mistress. She was leaning flirtatiously on Michael's shoulder, showing him a new shopping bag from a famous brand. But that wasn't what shattered Catherine. What broke her heart into a million pieces was the third person in the picture. Gloria, her mother-in-law, was sitting across from them with a smile so radiant and sincere that she had never once given to Catherine. And her hand, Gloria's hand, was extended tenderly to brush a strand of hair from the mistress's cheek, a motherly gesture, a sign of acceptance, a seal of blessing. Catherine felt a chill that pierced her to the bone, colder than the marble floor of her home. Michael's betrayal was painful enough, but seeing her mother-in-law, whom she had served despite always being ignored, conspiring with her husband's mistress, and even pampering her in that way, was like being stabbed from the front and back at the same time. She enlarged the photo with numb eyes, examining every detail. The shopping bag the mistress was holding was from Serafina's. Their table was filled with pretty desserts from the grand pastry. Every strange charge on the credit card now had a face, the satisfied face of the mistress and the happy face of Gloria. They were feasting with her money, celebrating their betrayal behind her back. Crash! The glass of water next to her laptop fell to the floor, shattering like her heart. But Catherine didn't cry. The tears seemed to have frozen in her eyelids. There was only a hollow emptiness, and that emptiness slowly began to fill with a cold, burning anger. She looked at her pale face reflected in the dark screen of her phone. The woman in the reflection looked fragile and defeated, but in her eyes, something had just been born, something hard, sharp, and relentless. This charade had reached its final act. Catherine remained motionless in her chair for almost an hour. She sat in silence amidst the shards of broken glass, letting the stillness of the office absorb all the emotions boiling inside her. The pain, the shock, and the disappointment slowly settled, replaced by a terrifying calm. It was the calm before the tsunami. She stood up and stepped over the broken glass without flinching. Her steps led her to the large window overlooking the perfectly manicured back garden, a garden she had designed and paid to maintain, but had never been able to enjoy in peace. Until now, she had thought her patience was a virtue. She thought that if she submitted and dedicated herself, one day she would be accepted. She thought that if she hid her power, she could maintain peace at home and her husband's ego. How naive she had been! Her patience was mistaken for weakness, her dedication was considered a duty, her sacrifice was taken for granted. They, Michael and Gloria, had taken everything from her. Her time, her energy, her money, and now her dignity. They let her build this penthouse only to turn her into a servant within it. Meanwhile, they brought in a stranger and sat her on the throne. "It's over," she whispered to her reflection in the window. Her voice was hoarse but firm. She returned to her desk. With a decisive movement, she turned the monitors back on. The stock charts, the financial reports, the urgent emails from directors. Everything looked different. Now this was no longer just a job, it was her kingdom. It was her source of power. It was what she had built with blood and sweat, something she would not allow the parasites in her life to trample on. The patient woman who cooked osso buco for 5 hours had died that afternoon. What remained was Catherine Pierce, the CEO of Apex Dynamics, a strategist known for being cold and calculating. The long slumber as a submissive wife was over. The queen had awakened. She picked up the phone and dialed the number of her personal assistant. "Miss Davis, good afternoon." "Yes, Miss Pierce, how can I help you?" Davis's professional voice came through the earpiece. "I need several things. First, prepare a complete report of all my personal assets, including real estate, vehicles, and bank accounts. Separate what are marital assets and what are assets purely in my name acquired before the marriage." "Understood, Miss Pierce." "Second, contact our legal team. Tell them to prepare a draft for a divorce and division of assets lawsuit. Attach all the asset data I requested in the first point as initial information." There was a brief pause. Miss Davis was clearly surprised. "Yes, Miss Pierce, I will process it immediately." "And Davis," Catherine added, her voice cold as ice, "from now on, inform me in real time of all expenses generated on the supplementary credit cards in the names of Michael Thompson and Gloria Thompson." "Understood, Miss Pierce." After hanging up, Catherine opened a drawer in her desk. She took out a small leather-bound notebook. On the first page, she wrote in neat, determined handwriting, "Operation Reclaim Everything." A plan began to form in her mind. Not a plan of emotional revenge, but a calculated business strategy. The objective was to strip them of all the power and luxury that had made them so arrogant and force them to face reality. She would make them feel what it was like to have nothing. The first execution of her plan began the next morning. Catherine deliberately got up earlier, put on her best power suit, and left the house before Michael and Gloria woke up. She had breakfast in her CEO office on the 50th floor, overlooking the entire city of New York. The view reminded her how vast her world was and how small her domestic problems were from that height. At exactly 9 a.m., she called her private banker. "Mr. Sterling, good morning. This is Catherine Pierce." "Ah, Miss Pierce. An honor to receive your call. How can I help you?" "I need you to freeze all supplementary credit and debit cards linked to my accounts, effective immediately." "All cards? Also those in the names of Mr. Michael Thompson and Mrs. Gloria Thompson?" Mr. Sterling asked to confirm. "Yes, all of them." "For the reason, simply note security concerns." "Say we've detected suspicious activity," Catherine said in a businesslike tone that brooked no argument. "Understood, Miss Pierce." Request received. "I will process it immediately. In 5 minutes, all cards will be inoperative." Catherine hung up, feeling a cold satisfaction. The first blow had been struck. Across town, Gloria and her son's mistress, Jessica, were enjoying the peak of their arrogance. After a treatment at a beauty salon, they decided to have lunch at a 5-star hotel restaurant. Jessica flirtatiously pointed to the lobster thermidor and the most expensive champagne. Gloria, feeling very generous and powerful with a wallet that wasn't hers, simply smiled and nodded. "You deserve the best, dear. Our future daughter-in-law has to look perfect," Gloria said with a wink. When they had finished dessert and the bill arrived, Gloria smugly handed her black card to the waiter. A few minutes later, the waiter returned, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The card has been declined." Gloria's face flushed. "Declined? How can that be? Try it again. The signal must be bad," she snapped. The waiter tried again. The same result. "It's still not working, ma'am." Jessica was starting to get impatient. Gloria clicked her tongue and took another card out of her purse, the platinum one. Declined, too. Panic began to set in. She tried the debit card. The same. Murmurs from nearby tables began to be heard. Gloria's face was burning. Shame, anger, and confusion mixed into one. She immediately took out her phone and dialed Catherine's number. In her office, Catherine saw her mother-in-law's name flashing on her phone screen. She let it ring a couple of times before answering with a slightly sleepy voice. "Hello, Mom?" "Catherine, what have you done to my cards? Why are they all being declined?" Gloria's shrill voice came through, so loud she didn't need to put it on speaker. Catherine moved the phone away from her ear for a moment. "Oh, they're declined, Mom?" she asked, feigning surprise. "Maybe it's a network failure from the bank, or maybe you entered the PIN wrong. Try again later." "Don't lie to me. This is your doing. I'm sure of it. Reactivate them right now." "I'm sorry. I'm in the middle of a meeting." "I can't be interrupted," Catherine replied calmly. And without waiting for a response, she hung up, looked at her phone screen, and then turned it off. On the other side, she could imagine her mother-in-law's panic and fury. She could imagine the pouty face of Jessica, whose plans for a luxurious day had been ruined. A small, cold smile, the first genuine smile in a long time, drew on Catherine's lips. The game had just begun, and this time she held all the cards. The front door of the imposing penthouse burst open, shattering the evening silence. Gloria stormed in like a hurricane, her face congested with anger and humiliation. Behind her, a disgruntled Jessica followed. The humiliation at the restaurant had been unforgettable. After all the cards were declined, Jessica had to pay with her own debit card, an unexpected expense she complained about during the entire cab ride. Catherine was waiting for them in the living room. She was sitting calmly on a single sofa with a cup of hot jasmine tea in her hand, as if she were waiting for honored guests. The image enraged Gloria even more. "Catherine Pierce!" she yelled, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. "How dare you humiliate me in public? Who do you think you are?" Catherine took a slow sip of her tea before setting it down. She looked at her mother-in-law with cold, unfamiliar eyes that Gloria had never seen before. "I am just sitting in my own home, Gloria. You are the one who came in screaming at this hour of the night. Who is the rude one here?" Gloria was speechless. The calm, sharp retort left her momentarily without words. Until now, Catherine would have been the daughter-in-law who bowed her head and apologized for any fault, but the woman before her was different. Jessica, sensing the unfavorable atmosphere, decided to intervene with a sycophantic tone. "Ma'am, calm down. I'm sure Catherine didn't do it on purpose, right, Catherine? Next time, don't forget to pay the credit card bills, okay?" It embarrassed her. It was a fatal mistake. Catherine's eyes locked onto Jessica. Her gaze was as sharp as a scalpel. "First, I have never forgotten to pay a single bill. Second, I don't recall inviting you into my home. And third," Catherine paused, letting each word sink in, "this is a matter between my mother-in-law and me. A stranger has no business interfering." Jessica's face instantly paled. The future daughter-in-law status that Gloria so proudly brandished seemed to vanish without a trace under Catherine's gaze. She looked towards Michael, who had just come down the stairs upon hearing the commotion, seeking defense. Gloria finally found her voice. "A stranger? She is Michael's future wife and my future daughter-in-law. The one who will soon be a stranger here is you. You are nothing but a useless wife who can't even manage the household finances." Catherine gave a faint smile, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The household finances, Gloria? Do you really want to talk about that? As far as I know, the people who have never contributed a single cent to the finances of this house are the ones who demand and shout the loudest. The barb was aimed precisely at Gloria and Michael simultaneously. Michael, who had remained silent until now, finally felt he should defend his mother and his mistress. But before he could open his mouth, Catherine had already stood up. "I'm tired. I'm going to rest," she said with a tone of finality. She walked past the three people, still paralyzed with shock, and went up the stairs to her room. She didn't look back once. That night, for the first time, Gloria felt that something was wrong, very wrong. She was used to living like a queen in this house, where her every word was a command. But tonight, she felt stripped of her power by the daughter-in-law she had always considered a doormat. The storm she had unleashed was nothing but a breeze compared to the cold calm of the awakened Catherine. After Catherine disappeared into her room, Gloria unleashed her remaining anger on Michael. "Did you see the wife you chose? She dares to talk back to me. As her husband, you should discipline her. Go talk to her right now and tell her to reactivate all my cards," she whined, pulling at her son's arm. Michael, his ego bruised by Catherine's icy attitude, felt challenged. He was the man of the house, or at least he had always believed so. With an arrogant stride, he followed Catherine to their bedroom. He found her standing in front of the closet, choosing a silk pajama set as if nothing had happened. The sight provoked him. "Catherine, what is this attitude all about?" he asked loudly. "Why are you disrespecting my mother, and why did you block the cards?" Catherine turned and looked at her husband with an impassive expression. "I'm simply tired of being insulted in my own home, Michael. And the cards were just a routine security measure." "Security? What nonsense! You deliberately humiliated my mother in front of Jessica. You're jealous, aren't you?" Michael accused, trying to find a reason his superficial understanding could accept. Catherine let out a small laugh, a dry, humorless sound that made Michael uncomfortable. "Jealous, Michael? I assure you, my current emotions go far beyond something so simple." "I don't want to hear it," Michael snapped, reverting to his arrogant mode. "Go downstairs right now, apologize to my mother, and reactivate all the cards tomorrow morning. I am your husband, and this is an order." This was the exact moment Catherine had been waiting for. She put down the pajamas and approached Michael, looking him directly in the eye. There was no longer any sweetness or pleading, only the gaze of a CEO evaluating an incompetent subordinate. "Michael Thompson," she called him by his full name, her voice low and dangerous. "Do you really want to talk to me about financial matters? Do you really want to discuss orders and authority in this house?" Michael fell silent. There was a clear threat in that question, a level of power he had never heard in Catherine before. Until now, he had no idea where her money came from. He just knew it was always there, flowing into his account every month. Enough money for a luxurious lifestyle and to support a mistress. He had always assumed it came from investments Catherine managed. "Of course I do," he replied, trying to cling to the remnants of his pride, though his voice trembled slightly. Catherine smiled sideways. "Fine. Then explain to me, what was your source of income this month? How much did you contribute to paying the mortgage, the utility bills, the staff salaries, or even the food you just had for dinner? Before you give someone an order, make sure you have the right to do so." Michael's tongue was frozen. He couldn't answer. He had never truly worked a day in his life. Everything he had was given to him. And at that moment, under his wife's piercing gaze, he felt like a foolish prince who had just been stripped of his crown. "It's late. I need to sleep," Catherine said, turning her back and ending the conversation. Michael could only stand there, stunned. His anger was mixed with confusion and a sense of humiliation. He had come to teach his wife a lesson, but instead, he felt like he had just received one himself. He still didn't fully understand what was happening, but one thing was certain. The Catherine he knew was gone, and he did not like her replacement at all. If the credit card incident was the main tremor, the following days were a series of aftershocks that slowly brought down the edifice of their comfort. Catherine no longer needed to say anything, she just acted in silence. The next morning, Gloria, impeccably dressed, was preparing to go to her social club meeting. She waited impatiently at the entrance. Her personal driver, James, didn't arrive. After several unanswered calls, she finally called the car service company. The response was brief and professional. "We're sorry, ma'am. The service contract for your address is under review at the request of our primary client. Service is suspended until further notice." "Primary client?" Gloria frowned, not understanding. Grumbling, she reluctantly called a cab, a supremely humiliating experience for her. Meanwhile, Michael was trying to transfer money to Jessica, who wouldn't stop complaining and demanding compensation for the restaurant incident. The notification on his phone screen left him cold. Insufficient funds. He checked his account. Catherine's monthly transfer, which should have arrived on the 1st, was nowhere to be seen. His account was practically empty. Panic seized him. He called Catherine, but the call went straight to voicemail. The chaos in the house intensified. The head housekeeper approached Gloria with a worried face. "Ma'am, our salaries have not been deposited yet, and the pantry inventory is almost depleted. The online grocery delivery service has also been suspended for non-payment." Gloria, who had never bothered with such trivial details, could only snap, "Well, use the cash in the house." "There is no more cash, ma'am," the housekeeper replied. Gloria was speechless. The house, always cool, now felt stuffy. The premium cable TV with hundreds of international channels suddenly stopped working. The Wi-Fi speed, once lightning fast, was now as slow as an old dial-up connection. The amenities they had taken for granted as a right were being cut off one by one, without warning. Catherine was like a ghost in her own home. She left for work before dawn and returned late at night when everyone was asleep. She deliberately avoided confrontation, letting them stew in their own panic, feeling the tap of money, which had always flowed freely, now drip to a halt. Their luxury was just an illusion that could be turned off as easily as flipping a switch. And now, that switch was in her hand. In her rental apartment, Jessica was getting restless. Her handsome, wealthy prince, Michael, now visited her more often with a frown than with shopping bags. The promises of dinners at the newest restaurants, a trip to Street, Bart's, a limited edition watch, all had evaporated. "Honey, what's wrong with you lately?" Jessica asked, massaging his temples. They had just finished dinner not at a fancy restaurant, but takeout that Michael had picked up on his way. "There are some problems at home." "What kind of problems?" "Nothing important, just Catherine being a little weird," Michael said, trying to avoid the topic. "How weird? Weird enough that my monthly allowance hasn't arrived yet?" Jessica snapped, her tone sharpening. "And where's your car? Why have you been taking cabs everywhere lately? What will my friends think if I tell them I'm dating a man without a car?" Michael sighed deeply. "The car's in the shop, and there was an issue with the cards. That's why I couldn't make the transfer. Just have a little patience." "Patience? I've had enough patience, Michael. I turned down many other rich men for you. You promised you would marry me and give me a better life than that bland wife of yours. And now what is this? Yesterday, I even had to pay for dinner myself." Jessica exploded, her sweet facade vanishing. Their relationship, built on the foundation of luxury and lies, was beginning to show its first cracks. Jessica was not with Michael for love, but for the lifestyle he could offer. When that lifestyle was threatened, her loyalty also wavered. "Listen, this is temporary. Soon everything will be back to normal." Jessica pushed him away. "I don't want promises, I want proof. Next week is my birthday. Buy me that bag we saw at Serafina's. If you buy it for me, I'll believe everything is fine." Jessica didn't say it, but her threat hung clearly in the air. Michael sank helplessly onto the sofa. That bag cost tens of thousands of dollars. Even under normal circumstances, it was money he would have to specifically ask Catherine for. Now, with cobwebs in his account, Jessica's demand felt like a death sentence. He was trapped. On one side was his wife, who had turned into a cold monster controlling his life. On the other, his mistress, who was starting to show her claws as soon as the money ran out. The foolish prince realized his perfect world was crumbling. A week of deprivation was enough to push Gloria and Michael to their mental limit. They couldn't take it anymore. That night, they deliberately waited for Catherine to return and intercepted her in the living room. The lights were on brightly, creating an interrogation-like atmosphere. "We need to talk, Catherine," Michael said, trying to sound authoritative, though his face showed exhaustion and frustration. Catherine set down her briefcase and looked at them both calmly. "Talk. What exactly do you want?" Gloria snapped, unable to contain herself any longer. "You're torturing us slowly, cutting off all the amenities, humiliating us, making us live like beggars. After all the kindness we've shown you, this is how you repay us?" "Kindness?" Catherine almost laughed. "What kindness are you talking about? The daily insults, or blessing your son's affair?" "Catherine, this is too much," Michael continued. "You are my wife. Your duty is to serve your husband and your family, not to act on your own like this. If you can't be a good wife, then maybe we what, Michael?" Catherine cut him off, her voice sharp. "We get a divorce? Is that what you want?" The direct question left Michael and Gloria in shock. They only wanted to threaten her. They weren't actually prepared for such a drastic consequence. They knew that without Catherine, they were nothing. "Michael, she has no respect left. She's trying to destroy your home," Gloria shouted, trying to manipulate the situation. "You are an ungrateful woman, Catherine. We welcomed you into this prestigious family. You, who come from an ordinary background, we gave you a life of luxury, and you've turned into a troublemaker. Enough." Catherine was tired of their false narratives. She said nothing more. With a very calm movement, she opened her briefcase, took out a brown envelope, and placed it on the coffee table between them. "What is this?" Michael asked suspiciously. "Open it," Catherine replied. With trembling hands, Michael opened the envelope and took out its contents, a glossy 8x10 photograph. Gloria leaned in to see. In an instant, all the anger and arrogance vanished from their faces, replaced by a ghastly pallor. The photo clearly showed the scene at the boutique cafe. Michael looking lovingly at Jessica, Jessica leaning flirtatiously, and Gloria smiling happily as she tenderly fixed Jessica's hair. The irrefutable proof of a triple betrayal. A suffocating silence filled the room. The ticking of the wall clock sounded like a hammer. Catherine finally spoke. Her voice was low, but it trembled not with tears, but with long-suppressed anger. "Thank you for what, exactly, Gloria?" Her eyes bored directly into Gloria's. "For the kindness of blessing my husband's affair with my money? Or for the life of luxury you enjoyed with my husband's concubine, while I worked myself to the bone to pay for it all?" Then she turned to Michael. "And you, Michael, you spoke of a wife's duty. Is it a husband's duty to cheat, lie, and live like a parasite off his wife?" There was no answer. Both were frozen, stripped bare by the truth, caught in the act. The photograph on the table became a silent judge, delivering their sentence. The real storm had just begun, and they realized they no longer had anywhere to hide. The silence that followed Catherine's words felt heavier than any storm. The photograph on the table became the room's center of gravity, drawing all eyes and sucking out all the oxygen. Michael looked at the photo, then at Catherine, then back at the photo. His face was a canvas of confusion and blatant guilt. He had no excuse. But Gloria, who had lived for decades behind a mask of arrogance, would not give up so easily. For her, admitting a mistake was the greatest form of weakness. Her pale face began to flush again, not with shame, but with an anger seeking an outlet. "It's a fake," she hissed, pointing at the photo with a trembling finger. "It's photoshopped. I'm sure of it. You're doing this on purpose to get rid of us and keep all of my son's fortune for yourself." Catherine looked at her without blinking. "Your son's fortune, Gloria? What fortune are you talking about?" "All of this," Gloria gestured with her hand, encompassing the magnificent room. "Everything in this house belongs to Michael. You are just living here on loan. You should be grateful we let you stay. And now you dare to stage this cheap drama." That threat was her final, fatal mistake. It was the last weapon she had always used to intimidate Catherine, but that night, the weapon turned against her. "All right," Catherine said calmly, as if dealing with a difficult client. "If you insist that I am just living on loan and that this house is your son's property, then there's nothing more to discuss." Gloria felt she had won. "I'm glad you know your place. Now pack your bags and get out of my son's house. Out!" Michael seemed shocked by the escalation. "Mom!" He tried to intervene, but his mother's withering glare silenced him. Catherine didn't move an inch. She just looked at her mother-in-law with an unreadable expression, a mix of pity and disgust. "I will gladly leave," Gloria said. She smiled triumphantly. "But the ones who will have to pack their bags are you two." She bent down, opened the briefcase she had left on the floor, and pulled out a thick, blue plastic folder. She opened it and spread its contents on the table, right next to the photo of the betrayal. There, laid out, were several official documents with the letterhead of the property registrar's office, stamps, and signatures. The most prominent one was on top, the deed of ownership for the land and building they were in at that very moment. "Read it," Catherine said. "Read the name of the sole owner listed there." Hesitantly, Michael picked up the document. His eyes widened as he read the name printed in bold in the owner section. It wasn't his name, not his father's, not a joint title. There was only one name, Catherine Pierce. Below it was the date of the transaction 2 years before she and Michael were married. The house had been bought in cash. The document fell from Michael's limp hands. Gloria snatched it and read it in a panic. She read it once, twice, 3 times. The truth hit her with such force that she staggered back and fell onto the sofa. Her face, once red with anger, was now ashen. Her life's entire narrative collapsed in an instant. She was not the grand dame of her son's house. She was merely a tenant, a parasite, living off the generosity of the daughter-in-law she had so despised. "This penthouse is mine," Catherine repeated, her voice echoing clear and authoritative in the suffocating silence. "The cars in the garage are company assets. This furniture I paid for. Even that plate you used for dinner last night, Gloria, is my money." She paused, letting the cruel truth sink to their bones. "So, Gloria, I repeat the question. If someone has to leave here, who would it be?" 2 days passed in an atmosphere of suffocating Cold War. Gloria locked herself in her room, too ashamed to show her face. Michael wandered the house like a caged lion, confused, furious, and desperate. All his attempts to contact Catherine by phone failed. His wife seemed to have disappeared from the house, but her presence was felt in every corner through the cut-off utilities and the torturous silence. On the 3rd day, a message arrived on Michael's phone from Catherine. It was short and emotionless. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. at this address. To end everything. Come alone." Below the message was an address in the heart of New York's financial district, on Park Avenue, an imposing skyscraper Michael had often passed but never entered. A spark of hope ignited in his mind. Maybe Catherine wanted to negotiate. Maybe he could still get a settlement or at least access to an emergency fund. With that thought, he decided to go. The next morning, with the last cash he had in his wallet, he took a cab to the address. When he arrived in front of the building called the Apex Tower, he was astounded. It wasn't a small office, it was the headquarters of a major corporation. Hesitantly, he entered the incredibly grand lobby. The floor was polished black granite, like a mirror. Seeing him approach, the receptionist immediately stood up and smiled kindly. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" "I have an appointment with Miss Catherine Pierce," Michael replied a bit nervously. The receptionist smiled even more brightly. "Ah, Mr. Thompson, of course. The president is expecting you. I'll escort you." "President? CEO?" Michael's heart pounded. He followed the receptionist to a private VIP elevator to the top floor, the 50th. When the elevator doors opened, a professional-looking young woman greeted him. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I'm Miss Davis, President Pierce's personal assistant. This way, please. The president is waiting for you in her office." Michael walked down a silent, thickly carpeted hallway. Every employee he passed stopped and nodded respectfully. "Good morning." They all seemed to know him. "Miss." Davis opened a massive solid wood door at the end of the hall. Behind it opened up an office larger than the entire ground floor of his penthouse. The walls were glass, offering a 360-degree view of Manhattan. In the middle of the room, behind a huge mahogany desk, sat a woman. It was Catherine, and at the same time, it was not. She wore a perfectly tailored dark blue power suit. Her hair was impeccably styled, and her aura radiated absolute power and confidence. This was not the Catherine who cooked ossobuco in the kitchen. This was not the Catherine who bowed her head when insulted. This was a queen on her throne. "Welcome to Apex Dynamics, Michael," Catherine greeted. Her voice was calm but resonated in the room. Or, to be more precise, "Welcome to my world." Michael could only stand there, his mouth slightly agape. The nameplate on the desk confirmed everything. Catherine Pierce, President and CEO. This company is yours?" he stammered. "Yes, it's mine. I founded it 8 years ago, starting in a small garage," Catherine replied as if she were talking about the weather. She pressed the intercom button. "Davis, please bring in the financial report for Mr. Thompson." A moment later, Miss Davis entered and placed a folder in front of Michael. "Open it," Catherine ordered. With trembling hands, Michael opened it. Inside were the details of every investment return he had received monthly. They weren't investment returns, but an expense item from the company, coded as stipend for executive family member. The next page contained a breakdown of all his and his mother's credit card expenses, all paid in full by Apex Dynamics. "Everything you've had, everything you've enjoyed, everything you've used to support your mistress," Catherine continued, her emotionless voice. "A verdict, was an allowance from me. A benefit I offered you because of your status as my husband." She looked directly into his eyes, now filled with terror. "And as of today, like an underperforming employee, that benefit is now officially revoked." Michael collapsed into the chair opposite her. His invisible crown had been shattered into dust. The foolish prince finally realized he was nothing but a name on an allowance list that had now been deleted. Michael's defeat at the Apex Tower was psychological, but Catherine knew that for people like him and Gloria, the biggest blow was the physical and public loss of their status symbols. 2 days after that meeting, the red European sports car Michael often used to show off was parked in front of the penthouse. Michael was getting ready to go out to do something very humiliating: borrow money from his friends. Just as he opened the door, 2 large tow trucks stopped right in front, blocking the exit. Several burly men in uniforms that read AD Logistics got out. "Good morning, we're from the Asset Management Department of Apex Dynamics," said the team leader, polite but firm. He showed an order. "We've come to repossess the 2 vehicles with the license plate numbers listed on this document, which are company property." One was Michael's sports car, the other the luxury SUV Gloria used for her social outings. "What are you doing? This is my car," Michael protested. "According to our records, this vehicle is registered as a company car for executive use under the name of Apex Dynamics." "It is not personal property, sir," the employee replied calmly, signaling his team to begin the operation. Inside the house, Gloria heard the commotion and came out immediately. Her eyes widened as she saw her precious car being prepared for towing. "Hey, what are you doing to my car? Don't you know who I am?" she screamed hysterically. Neighbors began to come out of their homes to watch the drama unfold in front of the magnificent building. The spectacle was a nightmare for Gloria, who had always guarded her image as a high society lady. "We are just following the instructions of the legal owner, ma'am," the employee replied, unfazed by Gloria's fury. Michael and Gloria could do nothing but watch, stunned, as the 2 luxury cars, their symbols of pride, were loaded up and taken away. They were now stranded in their palace without their golden chariots. The humiliation, in front of dozens of prying neighbors' eyes, was more painful than the financial loss itself. Catherine had not only taken away their luxury but also their pride and the social mask they had worn for so long. For Michael, losing the car was a huge blow, but the deadliest blow came from an unexpected place: Jessica. Her birthday was in 2 days, and Michael was in the worst situation of his life: no money, no car, no power. Desperate, he sold the only luxury watch he still had, a gift Catherine had given him on a past anniversary. With that money, he bought a handbag from a decent domestic brand, but a far cry from the Serafina's standard Jessica demanded. He showed up at Jessica's apartment with the gift box and a bouquet of flowers. Jessica's face, initially smiling, soured as soon as she saw the contents of the box. "What is this?" she asked in a cold tone. It's a gift for you. Happy birthday, honey," Michael replied nervously. Jessica scoffed. "A gift? You call this a gift? My grocery tote bag is more expensive than this." "Jessica, Please, understand. I'm going through a rough time." "I don't care about your problems." Jessica cut him off, her anger exploding. She threw the handbag box at Michael. "I'm sick of your excuses. You're a loser. A foolish prince with nothing. Did you think I was going to stay with you now that you've become a beggar? You're nothing but a parasite living off your wife, Michael. And now that your wife has cut you off, you're nothing." Every word from Jessica was a dagger stabbing directly into the heart of Michael's already shattered ego. "I've already found a replacement," Jessica continued with a cruel smile. "A real man, not a mama's boy like you." Just then, the horn of a luxury car honked from downstairs. Jessica grabbed her purse, an authentic Serafina's bag. "Where did you get that bag?" Michael asked in a hoarse voice. "From Mr. Evans. He's taking me to Paris next week to celebrate my birthday," Jessica replied nonchalantly. She walked past Michael, deliberately bumping his shoulder, and opened the door. "Oh, and one more thing. The rent for this apartment is due tomorrow. Congratulations on being homeless." Jessica slammed the door in Michael's face. Through the window, Michael saw Jessica go downstairs and get into a Bentley driven by an older, wealthy man. They drove off laughing, leaving Michael alone in the silent apartment hallway, shattered and completely alone for the first time in his life. After being abandoned by Jessica, Michael stumbled home. He found his mother sitting in the dark living room. The electricity had been cut off. They hadn't paid the bill, or rather, they couldn't pay it. Only a faint emergency light glowed, revealing the dust starting to accumulate on the expensive furniture. They sat in miserable silence, two nobles cast out from their throne. Suddenly, the front door opened. Catherine walked in, her silhouette sharply defined against the light from outside. She didn't light any candles or lamps. She just stood on the threshold, looking at the two figures huddled in the darkness. "I've come to make you one last offer," Catherine said, her voice cold and formal. Michael and Gloria raised their heads. "You have two options," Catherine continued. "First, you can leave here tonight. You can take your clothes, but leave everything else. I will not press charges against you for anything, and you will be free to go wherever you want. To leave without money, without a destination, without a place to live. That option was equivalent to being on the street. The second option," Catherine extended her hand. In her palm was a simple key. "I have rented a small apartment for you. 3 months' rent is already paid. Inside, there is basic furniture and some cash on the table so you can eat for a week. After that, you will have to find a way to survive on your own." Gloria looked at the key with horrified eyes. A small rental apartment after decades of luxurious living. It was an unimaginable humiliation, but Michael saw it from another perspective. After being humiliated by Jessica and left without a cent, Catherine's offer felt like a lifeline in the middle of the ocean. It was a humiliation, yes, but it was also a chance to survive. With a heavy hand, walking past his mother who was still paralyzed with shock, Michael walked towards Catherine. He didn't dare to look his wife in the eye. He just bowed his head and took the small key from Catherine's palm. It felt heavier than a gold bar. It was the key to his new, miserable life, and the symbol of his absolute surrender. That night, with only 2 suitcases of clothes, Michael and Gloria left their palace in a cab. They arrived at a narrow alley in an outer borough of the city. The rental apartment was exactly as they had imagined. Small, with paint peeling from the walls, and a single dim bulb glowing in the entrance. When Michael opened the door, a musty, closed-in smell greeted them. This was their bitter reality. From the golden throne, they had fallen into the deepest abyss. Life in the cramped rental apartment was hell on earth for Gloria. Her pride was eroded every day by the heat from the cheap roof, the noise of neighbors through the thin walls, and the bitter reality of having to think twice even to eat. The money Catherine had left them ran out in the blink of an eye. Now they lived on Michael's small, irregular salary. Arrogance was no longer a luxury she could afford. The final blow to her pride came when, in desperation, she tried to contact one of her high society friends who had always flattered her. With the last of her phone credit, she called and, in a pleading voice, tried to borrow money. The response was icy and humiliating. "Gloria, I'm sorry. My husband says we shouldn't associate with people of ill repute. Besides, we're going on vacation to Switzerland and need a lot of money." The call was cut. At that moment, Gloria collapsed. She realized that the social status she had so revered was as thin as paper. Without the money and luxury that backed her, she was nothing in their eyes, just a shameful piece of gossip. Gathering the strength and pride she had left, she did something she had never imagined in her life. She took a hot, crowded city bus and went to the Apex Tower. She looked so small and lost in the grand lobby. Her once expensive clothes now looked cheap and worn. Catherine's assistant, Miss Davis, saw her in the lobby with a look of compassion. She escorted her not to the CEO's office, but to a small, modest meeting room. A few minutes later, Catherine entered. She wasn't wearing a power suit, but a simple blouse and pants. Her face was serene. There was no expression of triumph. Gloria couldn't hold back any longer. She knelt on the floor and broke down in tears. Her sobs were no longer the manipulative tears of a drama queen. They were the heartbroken sobs of an old woman who had lost everything. "I'm sorry, Catherine. I'm sorry," she sobbed between tears. "I was wrong. I was arrogant. I was cruel to you. I was jealous of you. I was jealous seeing how incredible you were while my son can't do anything. So I blamed you for everything." She confessed it all. Her envy of Catherine's success, which she secretly knew about, her arrogance used to hide the shame of her son being a kept man, and even her fatal mistake of supporting Michael's affair to have a daughter-in-law she could control. "Please, I beg you, Catherine. I'm not asking you to give me back the luxury. I just can't live like this. Punish me, but please don't be so hard on Michael. Everything he did is because of my bad upbringing." Catherine listened to the entire confession in silence. She didn't help her up. She let her mother-in-law pour out all the venom of regret from her heart. When the sobs subsided, Catherine finally spoke. Her voice was soft but firm. "Get up, Gloria. Being on the floor doesn't change anything. Regret means nothing without change. This punishment is not to torture, but to teach. What lesson have you learned now?" Gloria looked at her with teary eyes. For the first time, she saw Catherine not as a daughter-in-law or a money machine, but as a woman much wiser and stronger than herself. While his mother swallowed the bitter medicine of repentance, Michael was swallowing dust and sweat in the warehouse of a large logistics company on the outskirts of the city. After being rejected from dozens of office jobs for having no work experience, the only job he could get was as a warehouse worker. The first day was hell. His body, accustomed to the softness of the sofa and the coolness of air conditioning, had to lift heavy boxes under the heat of the warehouse roof. His muscles screamed in pain. His soft palms were scraped and blistered within the first hour. His foreman was a rough man who swore at him if he worked too slowly. He had lunch with the other workers, sitting on a piece of cardboard, eating from a lunchbox with modest food. He listened to them complain about motorcycle payments and their children's tutoring fees, real problems that sounded so foreign to his ears. Here, no one cared about his last name or what car he used to drive. Here, his worth was measured solely by how many boxes he could move. Every night, he returned to the rental apartment with his body in pieces. He would fall asleep as soon as he arrived, with no time to think too much. Slowly but surely, the hard work began to change him. His arrogance and laziness were eroded by extreme exhaustion. The first weekend, he received his salary, a few old bills in a brown envelope. The amount wasn't even enough to pay for a round of drinks at the cafe he used to go to with Jessica. But as he looked at that money, a strange feeling arose in his heart, a feeling he had never experienced before. It was pride. This money was his. It wasn't a gift, not an allowance, not the result of living on loan. It was the result of his own sweat. That night, for the first time, he gave his entire salary to his mother. "Mom, here's the money for this week's groceries," he said briefly, and went to his room to rest his aching body. Gloria looked at the money in her hands and then at her son's back, now firmer and more robust. Tears welled up in her eyes again. Her son, her foolish prince, was finally starting to learn how to be a man. A month after the tearful encounter with Gloria, Catherine decided it was time to close the final chapter of her past. She didn't meet Michael in an office or at his home. She went to the small diner where the warehouse workers had lunch. Michael was sitting alone in a corner, eating hungrily. His appearance had changed a lot. His skin was darker, his body more muscular, and his gaze was no longer empty but filled with the concentration of a worker. He wasn't surprised to see Catherine arrive and sit across from him. Catherine, in contrast to the surroundings, wore casual but elegant clothes, but there was no longer a cold, intimidating aura. Her face seemed calmer, more at peace. "How are you, Michael?" Catherine greeted, her voice sincere. "Fine. I'm fine," Michael replied briefly and awkwardly. "What are you doing here?" Catherine got straight to the point. She placed a thick folder on the table between their plates. "These are the papers, Michael. Read them, and if you agree, sign them." Michael already knew what they were. The divorce papers. He opened them and read them quickly. Catherine wasn't demanding anything. The division of assets only stipulated that all assets in Catherine's name would remain her property, and Michael would not receive a single cent, a fact he had already accepted. There were no burdensome or humiliating clauses. Everything was clean and professional. "I'm not going to make things difficult," Michael said in a hoarse voice, not looking up from the papers. "I'll sign." "Thank you," Catherine replied. There was a moment of silence. The bustle of the diner filled the void between them. "Catherine," Michael called her, finally daring to look into the eyes of the woman who was once his wife. "I'm sorry. For everything. I know it's too late, and I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know. I truly am sorry." Catherine looked at him and, for the first time in a long time, saw the real Michael. Not the foolish prince, not the cheating husband, but simply a man who had made many mistakes and was now facing the consequences. "I have forgiven you, Michael," Catherine said softly, "and I have also forgiven myself for abandoning myself for so long. Now we can both start a new life." Michael signed the papers with a pen Catherine lent him. When he returned the folder to her, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. It was a sad ending, but also a relief. Their marriage, filled with hypocrisy, officially ended in a modest diner, over a table where a plate of food and the sweat of hard work rested. Months passed, and the lives of Michael and Gloria found a new, arduous rhythm. After the 3-month lease Catherine had funded ended, they had to pay the rent themselves. They had to move to an even smaller, more remote apartment. Gloria, with no professional skills, began to take orders for homemade cookies from her neighbors. Her baking skills, once only for showing off at her social gatherings, were now her only means of survival. Every morning, she learned to haggle over vegetable prices at the local market and to meticulously count every cent. She no longer complained. Her aged face was marked by fatigue, but also by a new strength. Michael continued to work at the warehouse. The pay was low, but he was a diligent worker. He no longer dreamed of sports cars or luxury watches. His dreams were now much more modest, to pay the rent on time and make sure his mother had money to buy ingredients for her cookies. The mother-son relationship changed completely. Before, they were partners in laziness and arrogance. Now, they were a team fighting to survive. Sometimes, when Michael came home from work and found his mother asleep from exhaustion in front of the oven, he would cover her with a blanket, a small gesture of care that would have never occurred to him before. They had lost everything: fortune, status, friends, and family. It was a very expensive life lesson. They weren't happy, but they were no longer living a lie. In poverty and hard work, they were slowly recovering the fragments of dignity they had lost. Catherine didn't give them a fish. She didn't even give them a fishing rod. She simply threw them into the sea and forced them to learn to swim. And surprisingly, they did. A year later, Catherine stood in front of the enormous window of her new office in Singapore. Apex Dynamics had achieved a massive expansion in the Southeast Asian market. The contract she had just signed was worth billions of dollars. She gave a faint smile, not a cold, calculating smile like before, but a smile tinged with genuine satisfaction and peace. After the divorce, she would occasionally hear about Michael and Gloria through Miss Davis, who monitored them from a distance per her instructions. Knowing they could survive on their own, Catherine was finally able to let go of the past completely. She no longer lived in the shadow of revenge. Her energy was now fully dedicated to building her empire and, more importantly, building her own happiness. She began to dedicate more time to herself. She learned to paint, traveled alone, and made new, sincere friends. Her phone rang. It was a video call from her friend Chloe. "Congratulations, Madam President. Incredible! I saw the news about the contract on TV," Chloe exclaimed from the other side of the screen. Catherine laughed. "Thanks, Chloe. It's all thanks to your support." "So, when are you coming back? We need to celebrate." "Soon," Catherine replied, her eyes gazing at the bright city skyline below her. After the call, Catherine stood there, looking at the endless city lights. Before, she felt her fortune was a golden cage she had built to lock herself in a farce. She had willingly become a small, invisible bird to protect someone else's ego. Now she realized that the cage had never existed. The door had always been open, she was just too afraid to fly. That betrayal, that pain, was the storm that broke her cage, and her revenge was how she learned to use her wings. Now, she no longer needed a cage. She no longer needed to dim her light for anyone. She was Catherine Pierce, not someone's wife, not someone's daughter-in-law. She was the queen of her own destiny.